This is the Rising Stars Show with Rex Wallace.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Rising Stars. Hey, this is season 1, episode 10. So it's we're doing a wrap on our first season, which we feel great about, and thanks to all the listeners, thanks to anyone who's given us a listen, whether it was just a snippet or a full episode. But extremely grateful for that, and extremely grateful for our guests, which have kind of made our show for the first season. So to wrap up season 1, we are doing something, focusing on some really cool data that just came out, Plan Preview 2, right? Which we're all I think all stars leaders around the country are geeking out about right now and trying to dissect. So we're going to do that today on the episode. We've kind of pride ourselves in season 1 on having some really bright stars, the brightest minds in stars, right? And we can definitely say that today. First off, let's bring on our famous co-host Mick Toomey. Mick, welcome back.
Thank you, sir. Happy to be here.
Excited to wrap up season 1 with you, and looking forward to season 2.
As am I.
So, and then our two guests, we have Jessica Asefa and David Dodge. Again, if you've been in stars, you know these two people or know of these two people. I'm going to let them actually do a quick intro of themselves, just so they can tell you kind of who they are and where they're at and what they do right now. So, Jessica, would you start?
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much, Rex. Jessica Asefa, and I'm currently working as the Chief Quality Officer at Atrial Health Plan, so a small national plan primarily located in the West, based in Oregon. Been there since January. Prior to that, worked in the consulting space for years, very focused on star ratings and quality improvement. And prior to that, years in a health plan, doing the same work, quality stars and clinical care. So nurse by training, and happy to be here today.
Well, we're really excited that you're here. So looking forward to this conversation a lot. And then David, would you do the same?
Yeah, happy to. So David Dodge, I'm the Director of Medicare Operations at Cambia or Regents. I'm also based in Oregon, so I guess this is our Oregon show, and just really pleased to be here. Jessica, I've looked up to you for years, and so it's an honor to be on this panel. And Mick and Rex, of course, have known both of you for several years, and so I'm really looking forward to this. I'm an actuary by training, had been our Medicare Stars leader until about a year ago. Now I've got customer service teams, eligibility teams, and Stars teams all reporting up to me.
Fantastic, yeah. So just keeping climbing, right? So really excited to have you both on, and we have a lot to talk about. And so Plan Preview 2 came out recently. Like I said earlier, we're all busy still dissecting it and trying to kind of understand what happened and explain what happened and kind of understand how it's going to impact going forward. But Jessica, let's start with you. Maybe let's start before we get into surprises. Let's talk about maybe what was not surprising. What came out of Plan Preview 2 that you expected to?
So what came out of Plan Preview 2 that I expected, probably what a lot of us expected, right? With COVID impacting healthcare the way it did, folks not being able to get in for appointments, being rescheduled, focus on vaccinations, and that whole campaign. And then, of course, the loss of the better of and that COVID relief, we expected to see shifts to the left, and I don't think that came as a big surprise to anyone, myself included. And I think that HEDIS is one of the places that we saw that play out the most. CAPS, I think we expected with CAPS some shift to the left as well. I know you said not to get to surprises yet, but I think the extent the extent to which they did shift to the left was quite a surprise for a lot of us. I don't think we expected that level of decline. So we were, for those of us that were counting on CAPS to be the saving grace to the effects of Tukey in 24, that came as kind of a punch in the gut, very sobering. So.
Yeah, so people, we talk about CAPS a lot, and this, I was definitely surprised that they all fell or stayed flat, right? Not a single CAPS cut point went up and got harder. And I really thought, with all of the investments that we're making, all the focus we're putting on member experience and the CAPS survey, that it would go up. I thought, virtually all of them would go up a little bit. Which, when I say a little bit, I mean a CAPS measure that goes up is one point is material, right? So But there's some people on my team who say, yeah, but this cap surveys, it's a blunt instrument, right? It's an old paper-based tool that's not perfect. So don't put too much weight on that as far as how it really reflects the patient experience. But at the same time, if you listen to Rand and AHRQ and everyone else, of course they have faith in it. But yeah, David, Mick, what did you guys think?
I have to stay on caps just because we all knew, that would be such a story in terms of this year's star ratings. Agree with everybody in terms of probably through this spring, right when the cap surveys went out, had a sense of surely they're going to the right, and becoming more challenging. And then we started seeing the articles around the industry in terms of, well, now wait a second, we're seeing a reversal here. Now the hypothesis that I've got in play here, and we're going through, various different tests tied to this, is I'm seeing what appears to be kind of an urban-rural divide. And Jessica and I, of course, are both in Oregon. And so we definitely have an urban aspect, and then we have rural, practically frontier aspects to what's happening. And I talked to a member in the Portland, Oregon metro area, right? No difficulty getting specialists. We're back in terms of that new normal now that everybody's kind of normalized tied to COVID. Meanwhile, I can go into a rural area, speak to a member there, and it's like traveling back in time 25 years. Value-based care hasn't taken hold, right? And the ability to see specialists, the ability to have adequate nursing staff in terms of rural areas is the big challenge. And so what I think is happening in terms of the access to care as surveyed in CAPS is we've gotten back, or not back, but we're moving ahead in terms of where things had been tied to accessing care, accessing specialists, getting needed care, right? All those things that come up on CAPS. But I think that in rural areas, to a certain extent, it's degraded from before 2020 levels. And so I'm guessing that that's the mix that we're seeing in play, trying to go about validating that, and then also, most important, fixing it for those rural members who are experiencing kind of a widening gap between what members, just 200 miles away face.
Yeah, so interesting, David. We saw exactly the same thing. We have a SNP and a PPO in the north, and their counterparts in the south, 2 contracts in the south as well, and saw that exactly same story play out is what you just explained, with the north actually improving in some CAPS measures that measure access to care, and completely the opposite story in the south, where you have just one pharmacy close and suddenly no one can get needed prescriptions, and we saw that play out in CAPS as well.
Yeah.
One of the things that we saw that I guess is surprising, but it seems to be this constant surprise. Each year, the med adherence numbers keep going up. You look at the MAPD average. I mean, we had so many conversations throughout the year with people, especially on the pharmacy side, who didn't think that the cut points were going to continue to go up, because it's at a certain point you have to hit that level, right? That you just can't get that many more people adherent. Yet this trend continues with the 4 and 5 stars, just continues to go up. And I think it caught people off guard, because if you're looking at the Acumen data, right, the MAPD average was not showing that we're going to see increases. So I think a lot of people were probably surprised to see all of those measures continuing to increase, right?
Yeah, I definitely was. But at the same time, for how many years have we been saying those adherence measures must be at the top, right? I mean,
we're hitting the plateau.
Yeah, I mean, we say that every single year, right? And I bet anybody on this call $100 that next year we're going to continue to see that 1%. It's kind of inch by inch in terms of that progression, but we've been saying it for way too long not to expect continuous improvement and then just figure out how to adapt and do what others are doing. But Mick, I thought the same thing as you. I thought with the refill too soon that we had in 2020 measurement year, right, for last year's star ratings, I thought you start relaxing that and we're going to see a dip, and sure enough, move to a new higher standard.
That's what I thought, because last year with that, when CMS allowed us to remove those refill too soon edits and just do everything else necessary to make home delivery more possible, and right, like, because some of the higher cut points for those measures jumped 4 and 5 points, right? I think last year. So naturally, I think, many of us thought, gosh, they might dip this year, but they didn't. Yeah, they just keep climbing even with those edits being put back in place. So yeah, it's surprising.
I
You
thought
know,
at a minimum they'd stay static. That threw off the majority of my
right.
projections within my health plan, where I was projecting, some star losses that I didn't anticipate. And with those fewer
Yeah,
number
that
of measures on the Part D side, that really can tank your Part D QI as well. So it was a
yeah, and those are surprises in the wrong direction
right,
as you're going
right.
after all of this stuff.
That's
You
right.
know, the other thing that jumped out at me that probably the thing that caught me the most off guard was what happened with reward factor. You know, you look at the thresholds, so it's you've got the with improvement and the without improvement, right? Most of them, for the most part, did what we expected them to do and kind of come back down to, the stars 2018 to 2021 kind of range. The one that didn't was that 85th percentile for the mean, and I personally I was shocked. That one last year for stars 2022 it jumped up to 4.34, 4.35, something like that, and we were expecting it to come down to kind of in that 4.15-ish range, but it stayed at, I think it was 4.28, which, what does that tell you? I think it's saying it's really showing, and this is for the without improvement side, that those plans that are really high performing and taking advantage of that 40 basis point bump of reward factor, they're really beginning to kind of create a gap between all the other plans, and I think that's why we're seeing that shoot up. But interested and curious to see if you guys have other thoughts on that.
I think that's we're seeing that play out kind of across the board. And I know some other people, some of our clients said last week in a meeting that, they've done some analysis and even though half of the cut points got easier, right? It's not necessarily half of the high performing cut points, right? It's different story. There's so many storylines in these cut points. I think, well, I know there are, but exactly what you just said, Nick. I think the high performing plans continue to. I think they're creating more and more separation, in cut points, right, or in performance in general, which is playing out. I think in that reward factor threshold. I believe, yeah.
You remember the phenomenon a few years ago where if you'd been in this game, right, if you'd been a Medicare Advantage player for a while and you knew about stars and its importance, that sort of gave you a sense of advantage, right? And then at the same time, it was something where as new entrants came on, they'd sort of bring down the performance, right? Because we're all graded on a curve. This is all a distribution. One of the things that I want to pay attention to is when the data comes out for 2023 stars is among those who are relatively new to stars, right? Are they coming in terms of that sort of bottom 20th percentile performance that we've associated with in the past, or are they squeezing in the 80th, right? And I say that because, Mick, part of what you're describing is sort of, that cut above kind of growing further and further, right? I wouldn't be surprised if another thing that's happening is you've got new entrants who are coming in and they already know, right? They've got sophisticated business plans in terms of MA plans. They know that it's table stakes to be at least 4 stars. And so I wouldn't be surprised if a newer plan is able to achieve high performance because they just know from the very start that that's how you do well in MA. And so that's something that I'm, pretty eagerly awaiting this data on just to validate if that's an effect that's actually playing out here.
Yeah, I don't know. And that's interesting. That's, along the similar lines, there's so many health plans too that, I don't know if we name health plans on here, just in case we don't, I won't, but there's 3 come right to top of mind that are spreading health plans, small health plans all across the country. And their current health plan ratings are not strong. Their current health plan ratings are not meeting the 4-star mark, and Tukey's even going to more negatively impact that. So of these 3 plans I'm thinking of, and all the contracts they have that aren't even rated yet, I wonder how many of them they already haven't figured it out. They're expanding everywhere, and what are the ratings of these new contracts going to be, and what impact will that have to future cut points?
Well, you think about if they're coming in and performing at that lower range, how low are they? And you got to expect that those are going to be the ones that kind of get Tukey'd out of the game, in terms of coming up with the new cut points. And depending on how far they are from the kind of the normal range of performance, I think that's where you're starting to see a lot of the really big shifts to the right on especially the 2 and 3 star cut points, and to a degree the 4 and 5. But yeah, it'll be interesting. Like, we're really looking forward to getting that October data out so we can truly look at the range of performance this year.
I love how you turned Tukey into a verb.
You definitely don't want to get Tukey this year. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Mick, when does it get added to the Urban Slang Dictionary?
Right.
I'm pretty sure it's in process right now.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Jessica, what you were saying, I mean, like, because we're working with more and more plans who are either brand new, which is encouraging because they are seeking guidance earlier on than what I remember, or at least the last several years, right? What I'm seeing, and plans that are expanding, pretty aggressively into new markets. Those two segments of plans face lots of headwinds, right? If you're expanding into new markets, you face all kinds of headwinds that a stable company doesn't face. If you're new, you have all kinds of learning curve to cover and relationships to build in your communities with providers and members, et cetera, right? So when you put those two together, and if you have kind of new plans that are expanding, I mean, yeah, they're going to get underwater really fast without a lot of help. So they're not going to be able to catch up with these cut point movements. There's just no way.
Agree. And then that compounded by, CMS's new guidance that, plans that perform below 3-star mark at the overall Part C, Part D, or any combination of those three for 2 years in a row will be disallowed to expand.
Can't get
be disallowed to open new contracts. They hit it one more time, they could be terminated. And just right. I see the impacts of Tukey and all these other methodologies just being compounded in the future as some of these scenarios play out.
Definitely,
we'll be left with a smaller number of higher performing plans.
Well,
maybe
and you're right, because
Darwinism.
You think about that Tukey impact that's going to have on some of those lower performing plans. If you're already, kind of in that where you've got a number of measures in that 2 and 3 star range, this is a real shot to the gut, to use a little bit of your verbiage from before, Jessica, because it's going to be more and more challenging to be able to regain and move up to get to that 3 and 4 star status as Tukey rolls out and becomes kind of more of a standard practice.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Hey,
I really feel for all those contracts just sitting at the cusp of slightly above 3.75 where Tukey is going to cause them of that measure decline, and they lose their buffer, right? With that, even 1 or 2 measures goes down and they lose their QB.
I've got a surprise story, Rex. You started off the call with, surprises, right? Sort of what conformed to expectations. I think our answer was, we had expectations. Everything was surprising, right? But Jessica, tied to what you're describing, my STARS leader was going back through when the second plan preview came out and validating everything, right? Running through the calculations, making sure that every thing checks out when the second plan preview comes out. And without naming plans, I can just mention one of our plans came in overall rating 3.754, right? So a single weighted measure you pick, right? If it came in lower at 3.754, that'd be enough to tip you below 3.75. So it felt like hanging on by a pinky as a plan going through this. And he's going through the validation of our results and discovers, something's going on with single-weighted Haas. And what happened was, because of the higher of single-weighted Haas from extreme and uncontrollable circumstances, right, that was the thing that introduced this idea of, hanging on by a pinky, that sort of thing. And I feel as one of those plans, right, we've got 8 total plans, and one of our plans is right on that ledge. Yeah, it's not a comfortable spot to be in, right? And then you just do something additive, right, to the point of Tukey, right? You just add in Tukey. Surely that's going to be enough across all the measures for one to fall, something along those lines. So, gearing up for end of year is what we're all about, end of year and then caps.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what we're pushing right now and working with our customers on is the reward factor and QI piece. Like you're saying, David, one weight measure going down just 1 star rating can have a significant impact. We had one this year, that PP2. I won't mention the name, but the cascade effect was really interesting for someone who geeks out on these numbers. It was really interesting for me because you could see CMS actually made an update, and all right, I won't comment on that. They made a change to theirs and dropped them from a 3 to a 1 on their star rating. That one change to that one weight measure dropped them enough to boot them out of reward factor eligibility, which then took them down to another star rating, which then triggered QI that had to kick in. So that one weight measure took them down just over 30 basis points. One weight measure. So
Dropping
that
2
math
stars,
doesn't
yeah.
seem real, but we
Yeah.
can lay it out. It's shocking. Yeah.
Mick, you're like speaking to my nightmares
what
here as you're describing the situation.
I know.
Yeah.
Right.
What
And to your
you were
point
on the
about the
favorable side
Tukey,
this year, right?
right, worked out. But that's like Jessica was saying, if you're on the bubble and Tukey comes in, we've probably run this on, I don't know, 150-ish contracts, applying Tukey and kind of seeing what the impact is. And to date, we haven't seen anybody improve. We've seen some kind of hold pretty closely, but for the most part, 10, 12, 15 basis point loss, assuming everything else is the same. And so if you're in the bubble like Jessica was talking about, all of a sudden, all of this gets far more interesting and important, and every member matters. Because if you're dropping from a 3.85 to a 3.74, that's millions and millions of dollars of impact with nothing that really changed on your side.
Now, Mick, I'm curious. You mentioned introduction of Tukey, 10, 12, 15 basis point impact. Is that just Tukey, or is that Tukey plus cut point growth?
We ran this on the last time that we had like a full list of actual scores, which was Stars 2021. So there was no cut point change. This was strictly Tukey.
When you ran those scenarios, did you all notice certain measures being impacted more than other measures by that methodology?
We did. We saw like breast cancer screening, the 2 and 3 star cut points, we saw jump up quite a bit, 10, 15 basis points. We didn't see any changes on 4 and 5. Some of the ones that frankly surprised me, but then, the way Tukey works, it's kind of, it all depends on what is the layout of all the scores, right? And how does it break out? And so the ones that we saw the biggest impacts on were the ops measures, call center, complaints. I think those 2 were the ones that we saw the most significant change, because when you break them into the quartiles and find your fences and start deleting contracts, it completely changed the shape. Complaints and call center really jump out, because a good portion of those contracts come up to where you were deleting measures that were above some of the cut points before. So completely changed the shape. And so it'll be interesting. We're going to rerun it, once all the new data comes out for Stars 2023. But as of right now, probably a handful of the HEDIS measures, we saw big impacts, breast cancer screening being most impacted, and then the ops measures.
Mm-hmm. And
I was hoping that 4 weighted measures wouldn't be included in your list of most impacted.
Yeah, I think that's not a unique feeling on that one. And, the interesting thing is, especially then when you're looking at these 4 weight measures, because it's not just a 2 and 3 star measure impact. You're going to see bigger changes in those cut points. But if you're on the lower end of the cut point range, even at 4 or 5 stars, cut point goes up a point or 2 because of Tukey, you drop down. So you're still getting Tukey'd, right? But even though you're a high performing plan, we saw a lot of plans where the measures that got impacted were all 4 and 5 star measures.
Those ops measures, especially some of those you named, call center and whatnot, these have become kind of table stakes. Like, we count on those. They're our 5-star gift. Every now and then they drop to 4 and we're like, crap, but that's about as bad as it gets. So that's really going to be very negatively impactful to a lot of plans that have just come to count on those to offset losses and other measures.
That's right. I mean, nothing is for sure anymore. I think this first year is going to be a real learning. We can run models. CMS always does things that, you don't always have all of the details. But I think this first year is going to be really telling.
And this year we had a taste of this with mean resampling. So, I don't know how many people paid attention to this, but, we had guardrails come into play this year. But I don't think everyone really remembered that we also had mean resampling in play that came in last year. So this year we had mean resampling and guardrails. And if you just look at the cut point movement and take that call center measure, the Part C call center measure, the 3-star threshold, if you just compare the new 2023 cut point to the 2022 cut point, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think it dropped 2 points, right? So, no one's really paying attention to it. Okay. And it's, again, the 3-star threshold, and a bunch of plans are in the 4 and 5-star threshold on these measures. So not material for a high performing plan. However, when you dig into it, because of mean resampling, like Tukey, mean resampling requires the creation of a new cut point baseline that the guardrail is applied to for 2023. So if you go back to the 2022 tech notes and dig into tables, I think J3 and J4 in the appendix right in the back, you see the new mean resampled cut points, and some of them are different than the actual cut points for 2022. Take this one, for example. So the call center TTY measure for Part C, the 3-star threshold was something like 7 points. It dropped like 7 points or something. So, and I might not be remembering that exactly, but the point is, we see it as a 2-point drop. It actually increased 5 points over the previous baseline, so which was the most it could increase because of the guardrail. So the key message there is, we look at it and we see it on the surface as declining in performance, no big deal, industries dropping a little bit in the 3-star threshold, but in reality it rose as high as it possibly could in that 3-star threshold. Again, not a material measure and threshold for high performing plans, but that's what we're going to see with Tukey, right? Like, it's going to be, so I think we see half of the cut points got easier. They didn't really, they're disguised by this impact of mean resampling, just like they're going to be next year with Tukey, but to a much bigger degree, we think, right?
No, I was just going to say, it'll be interesting to see when CMS finally comes out with the simulation scenarios for plans nationally, with all of those methodologies applied to 3 years of our ratings. It'll be very interesting to see what that looks like. And I'm curious if CMS is just going to share individual plan data with each plan, or if they're going to provide us with some sort of, at least a summary of national.
I'd sure hope for the former, right? And the reason why is because otherwise you don't know exactly what you're looking at, right? And it's one of those things where when we start talking about average impacts, something like that, average impacts doesn't really affect our plans, right? It's the specific impacts that are so foundational. And so, I'm really hungry to see some sort of simulations regarding exactly where we'd land based on this, and then what the impact would be to the industry. But I think it's going to be large. I mean, the distortionary effect is so big, Rex, tied to what you were just talking about, tied to cut points. And Mick, you're about to weigh in. Do you want to follow up on that?
Well, I mean, I was really just thinking, on some of these things where it looked like things dropped a little bit, when in reality they went up. So plans are going to be basing their plans based on some of this movement, which is actually the opposite direction. So areas where you may not be applying a lot of effort, maybe you should, because if they're going to keep bouncing up at the high end of improvement, you could be surprised with another big gain next year. And that doesn't even include the Tukey impact, where on some of those situations you drop out the lower outliers. Again, it'll be really interesting, and I can say interesting from a kind of statistical standpoint on my side. I realize the interesting has a different connotation on your guys' side when you're actually accountable for the plans. But I think that there's a lot of, there's just going to be a lot of learning when this stuff comes out and really understand how it all played out. Because Rex is right. If you're expecting that the cut points can't move more than 5 points from 2023, from what we're seeing, that's also going to be a bit of a rude awakening as the data actually falls out for the final result.
So take the decision science of stars, right? And for a lot of years, it's been if you can get really precise in terms of determining those members to move. And I think as an industry, we've gotten more focused on kind of old school members to move within a HEDIS context, within an adherence context, moving that over to the member experience side of things, right? And we start thinking about members to move as it relates to CAPS. A lot of a plan's ability to be successful has hinged on its ability to prioritize initiatives, right? Focus on a few key measures. I see it as being a lot harder, really right now, right? And the reason why I say it is it feels like we're on the brink of every single measure matters, and so that prioritization exercise that I think we've all gotten good at over the years really calls for reviewing what the strategy looks like and considering all these other effects, right? Because if you applied that old strategy this year, it actually may not serve you just because of, what may be going on in terms of Tukey, in terms of mean resampling, that sort of thing. And so have to work everything in. But I'm curious, does anybody see it sort of stopping before every single thing matters, right? And have to focus on every single thing. How are you kind of guiding plans towards focus being such a key as we approach year end?
A lot of the stuff that we're looking at, include, again, from a strictly Tukey standpoint, let's take a look at those measures where we ended up with 2 and 3 stars, or any of those measures where no matter what, 4 or 5 stars, if you were close to the lower end of those cut points. I'd say any of those situations, you're at risk, and try to think about, are there things that we can put in place? How does that influence the chart chase strategy? There are a lot of things that play into this. Similarly, we're looking at the QI measures. Where are we in terms of the expected QI thresholds? Can you get some out of significant decline into no change, or some from no change into significant improvement? And then the final piece that we're looking hard at right now is reward factor. Where are you on expected reward factor? Where are you on the mean and variance thresholds? As a result, are there different areas that you want to focus on, and which measures within that make sense? So that's how we're approaching it right now.
Yeah, and I would say, you obviously can't take your eye off the 3 and 4 weight measures, but those 1 weight measures, if you look at osteoporosis, right, it jumped 5 points on every threshold this year. It was the only measure, right, that reached the end of the guardrail on every measure, because they've finally figured out, they're improving it, right. That is one that it gets some attention just because it's low performing across the board. It's got a low national average typically, but now especially, I think measures, those 1 weight measures, and like the examples we've given, right, where David, looks like you achieved 4 stars on one weight measure, and Mick and I had a client who lost, a rating on a 1 weight measure. So yeah, you can't ignore anything, I don't think. I mean, leave no stone unturned is the.
Yeah, I think if we were making predictions, if we go back, wind back the clock 6 months, none of us would have said osteoporosis management would have been, the belle of the ball in terms of cut point growth, right? I think that surprised everybody.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, what is everyone doing here? Right.
Well, I was going to kind of move forward with kind of, as we look into 2024, like, what is this? It's Jessica and David. What are you doing differently now heading into Q4 and Q1 now that we have these cut points? What did it do to your strategy, if you can say?
Well, I can start and then pass off to you, David. For us, I think we're needing to become much more strategic, right? Like, gone are the days of boil the ocean approach and strategy to close stars gaps, and we're really needing to not, we see, like Dave and I were talking about earlier, between North and South, there's huge between contract differences, and we're needing even more to like get more granular and what are within contract differences, and who are those unique subsets of members that are dragging down our ratings, and how do we get our arms around that unique subset that's unique for each contract within our plan. So it's a big effort, especially for plans with multiple contracts and small data teams. That can really be a challenge, but if we don't, I don't think that there's any hope of keeping up with some of the larger national competitors. And I'll just add before closing out this thought, that just becomes even more challenging in a COVID, we're not really post-COVID, but kind of, right? And mid/post-COVID environment where impacts are different, strategies are different. There's telehealth, and then there's those with access to telehealth and those without access to telehealth. And how do you work around that? And there's been a number of studies for members, older adults, that canceled their appointments for whatever reason during COVID. The reschedule rate is more than half as low for those that are non-vaccinated than vaccinated. So though COVID vaccines aren't a star measure, we have to vaccinate that unvaccinated crowd. I think a lot of these folks before they're comfortable and ready to move back into the physician's office and reschedule some of those non-urgent appointments. So it's a whole different game in many ways.
I just mentioned two dynamics that are less STARS methodology changes than they are population differences. So one thing that's in play is across our plans, we were the 11th fastest growing plan a couple AEPs ago, 9th fastest growing plan an AEP ago, right? And so I bring that on a percentage basis. And so I bring that up because it's that replenishing the pool, paying attention to what's happening with the freshman class initially. That's what we call them, right? Sort of the new members who are coming in, paying attention to more the classic care gap measure performance for those members, right? And then also the onboarding associated with member experience measures when they come around the subsequent year for being eligible for CAP surveys. So really paying attention keenly to those new members who are joining us. And then the second bit, I kind of alluded to it earlier, but my eyes have been open based on these CAPS results to an effect that I was hypothesizing we're seeing. Jessica, you mentioned, yeah, indeed, we're seeing, just kind of breaking on those contract breakouts. Mm-hmm. But if we go back to 2019, it could be the case that maybe there was sort of 10 years difference, maybe 15 years difference in terms of the practice of medicine between urban and rural areas. And now I really do think it's a 25-year difference. I think that in urban areas, you're going to see just continuing to build these, foundations and sort of the apex of value-based care. And I think that's going to be exciting. From a strategic and sort of resource allocation perspective, I want to make sure that that's moving forward, but I have a lot of faith that a lot of that is going to take care of itself. We just need to get members into offices or receiving care in home, right? That sort of thing. It's the rural side of things where I think we've got to take a lot of action. And in truth, I'm really excited about that, right? Because you talk to one member, and Jessica, I'm sure you can relate to this, but you talk to one member and they're having a tough time and they're considering, do I need to sort of practice medical tourism within the United States, within a state in the United States, right? I want to work on that problem. I think that's a really compelling one to be working on. And at the same time, I'm also thinking about the way that growth plans, right? Working with product teams, working with sales teams, the way that those growth plans sort of translate into STARS results to make sure that we can capably deliver on the STAR side associated with new growth.
Yeah, I think you're both spot on it. And I think that rural-urban divide is a key part of health equity, right, as we look for equitable care. I mean, I come from I grew up in a rural town of 150 people, right, and still have family back there and know well the challenges that, in healthcare and everything else that you just deal with when you're in a space like that. And like helping to solve that problem is it's going to help plan performance dramatically, but it's just the right thing to do too, obviously. Okay, I think we've had a great conversation. Thanks so much, Jessica. Thanks so much, David. That was fantastic. So any last comments as far as want to tell people kind of how to follow you or anything like that? Are you on LinkedIn, Twitter?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I try to avoid Twitter like the plague, right? But I'm on LinkedIn, and so I can definitely look me up there. What about you, Jessica?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn as well. Sorry, I misunderstood the question, Rex. I thought you meant how to tell health plans how to follow our performance within STARS.
Oh,
but yeah,
right,
I'm
right,
definitely
right.
on LinkedIn. Pretty active on there, so it's one of my main sources of info, and happy to meet any of you out there on that forum.
So connect with Jessica, ask for access to her dashboards, right?
They come from Hyperlift.
Hey, there you go.
There you go.
What a plug.
That was a great plug. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, but thanks so much today, Mick. Thanks for co-hosting, man. This has been a great season one. Yeah, and thanks to our producer Stefan Lubinsky, and most of all, thanks to all of our guests that we've had this year and our listeners. But yeah, our guests have been top notch, and today was a great example of that. So good conversation. We're heading into season 2, so next episode will be season 2, episode 1. More surprises to come as we get into 2023 STARS and are able to digest kind of that public facing data, right, and how everybody performed. So Yeah, but thanks so much, and we'll see you
Thank
guys
you.
next time.